The winter evening settled over Crescent Park like a heavy blanket, painting the snow-covered ground in shades of blue and silver. Street lights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows between the bare oak trees. The playground equipment stood empty and forgotten, swings moving gently in the cold breeze that carried the scent of coming snow. Marcus. Blackwood had never imagined he would die like this. The Alpha King of the Northern Territory lay sprawled against the base of an old maple tree, his dark coat stained with blood that had long since stopped flowing freely. His breathing came in shallow, labored gasps that formed small clouds in the frigid air. Every movement sent waves of pain through his body, reminding him of the silver blade that had found its mark between his ribs, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in his heart as he looked down at the 3 small bundles pressed against his chest, his triplets, his sons. Born only 6 months ago, they were perfect in every way that mattered. Gabriel, with his shock of dark hair and serious eyes. Samuel, lighter in coloring but with the same stubborn chin as his father. And little David, the smallest of the 3, who had fought so hard just to take his first breath. They were sleeping now, somehow peaceful despite everything that had happened. Marcus had managed to wrap them in his coat before his strength began to fail, their tiny bodies warm against his cooling skin. He could feel their heartbeats steady and strong, and it gave him something to hold on to in these final moments. The betrayal still felt fresh, even hours after it had unfolded. His own brother, Jonathan. His trusted beta, the man who had stood beside him through countless battles and difficult decisions. The man who had promised to help raise these children when their mother died during childbirth. Jonathan had looked him in the eye and driven that silver blade deep into his chest, whispering words that would haunt Marcus until his dying breath. The pack needs stronger leadership. Your sons will never sit on the throne. Marcus had fought back, of course. Even wounded, even caught off guard, he was still an alpha. But Jonathan had come prepared, bringing 3 other wolves loyal to his cause. They had beaten Marcus until he could barely stand, then dragged him and the babies to this remote corner of the park where no one would think to look for them. They left them here to die slowly, to freeze, to fade away like forgotten memories. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He had been born in a place much like this, abandoned as an infant by parents who couldn't care for him. A human family had found him and raised him until his true nature manifested. Now, 32 years later, he found himself in the same position with his own children. The snow began to fall again, light flakes that caught the streetlight and danced in the air before settling on Marcus's dark hair. He tried to shift his position to better shield the babies, but his body refused to cooperate. His vision blurred at the edges, and he knew his time was running short. "I'm sorry," he whispered to his sons, his voice barely audible above the wind. "I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you better." Gabriel stirred slightly at the sound, making a small noise that was almost a whimper. Marcus's heart clenched. They would wake soon, hungry and cold, and he would have nothing to give them. The sound of footsteps crunching through snow made Marcus's head snap up, instantly alert despite his condition. His wolf senses, dulled by injury and blood loss, couldn't identify the approaching scent. Friend or enemy? Had Jonathan returned to finish what he started? A figure emerged from behind a cluster of snow-laden pine trees, moving carefully across the uneven ground. As they drew closer, Marcus could make out more details. Small in stature, wearing a worn winter coat that had seen better days. A woman, he realized, though he couldn't see her face clearly in the dim light. She stopped when she saw them, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. "Oh my God," she breathed, and Marcus caught the distinctive scent that marked her as an Omega. "What happened to you?" Marcus tried to speak, tried to warn her away or ask for help, but only a rough cough emerged. The movement sent fresh pain lancing through his chest, and he tasted blood on his lips. The woman approached slowly, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "It's okay," she said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Elena. I work at the Children's Hospital downtown." Elena. The name seemed to resonate somewhere deep in Marcus's consciousness, though he couldn't place why. She knelt beside him in the snow, and he could see her face clearly now. She was younger than he had first thought, maybe 25 or 26. With warm brown eyes and auburn hair that escaped from beneath her knit cap. Her face was kind but tired, as if she had seen too much sadness in her work. "These are your children?" she asked, her voice gentle as she looked at the sleeping triplets. Marcus managed a small nod. Elena's expression softened further as she studied the babies, then returned her attention to his injuries. "You're hurt badly," she observed, though she made no move to touch him without permission. "How long have you been out here?" "Hours," Marcus managed to rasp, surprised that his voice worked at all. "They left us." Elena's eyes flashed with anger, but her tone remained calm. "Who left you? What happened?" Marcus closed his eyes briefly. The full story was too complex, too dangerous for a human Omega to understand. How could he explain pack politics and succession disputes? How could he tell her that his own brother had tried to murder him and his children for the sake of power? "Family," he said finally. "Betrayal." Elena nodded as if she understood more than she was saying. "I see this sometimes," she said quietly. "People who hurt the ones they're supposed to protect." She was quiet for a moment, studying his face. Then she made a decision that would change everything. "I can't move you on my own," Elena said, reaching into her coat pocket for her phone. "But I know people who can help. People who won't ask too many questions." Marcus grabbed her wrist with what little strength he had left. "No hospitals," he whispered urgently. "Not safe." "They'll find us." Elena paused, her thumb hovering over the screen. Something in his voice and his eyes must have convinced her that he was telling the truth. She put the phone away. "Okay," she said. "No hospitals, but we need to get you somewhere warm and safe, especially these little ones." She stood and looked around the park as if calculating distances and options. "My apartment is only 3 blocks from here. It's small, but it's warm and it's off the grid enough that whoever hurt you won't think to look there." "You don't understand," Marcus said, struggling to make her see the danger. "If they find you helping us, Ryan, then they'll have to deal with me," Elena said simply. "And I'm tougher than I look." There was something in her voice, a steel beneath the softness, that reminded Marcus why he had always respected Omegas. They might not have the physical strength of alphas or betas, but they had something else, something that made them fierce protectors when it mattered. Elena disappeared for several minutes, leaving Marcus alone with his fears and his children. When she returned, she was dragging a small sled that looked like it had been salvaged from someone's garage sale. "Found this behind the maintenance shed," she explained, positioning it beside him. "It's not much, but it should work." The process of getting Marcus and the babies onto the sled was slow and painful. Elena was stronger than she appeared, but Marcus was a large man even in his weakened state. By the time they were ready to move, all 3 babies were awake and beginning to fuss. "Shh," Elena murmured, adjusting the coat around them as she prepared to pull the sled. "It's going to be okay. We're going to get you somewhere safe." The journey to Elena's apartment felt like it took hours, though Marcus knew it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. He drifted in and out of consciousness as Elena pulled the sled through back streets and alleyways, avoiding the main roads where they might be seen. Her apartment was indeed small, just a studio with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely large enough to turn around in, but it was warm and clean, with soft lamplight that felt like heaven after the harsh streetlights of the park. Elena helped Marcus onto her bed, then immediately turned her attention to the babies. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had worked with infants before, checking them over for injuries or signs of distress. "They seem okay," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Cold and hungry, but otherwise healthy." "When did they last eat?" Marcus tried to remember. Time had become fluid since the attack, measured in heartbeats and labored breaths rather than minutes and hours. "This morning," he said finally. "Maybe longer." Elena nodded and began searching through her small refrigerator. "I don't have formula," she said, "but I have some milk and honey. It's not ideal, but it will keep them going until I can get to the store." As she worked to prepare makeshift bottles, Marcus studied her profile in the lamplight. There was something familiar about her, something that nagged at the edges of his memory. Had they met before? It seemed impossible. He would have remembered an Omega with such presence, such quiet strength. "Elena," he said suddenly. "Your last name. What is it?" She glanced over at him, surprised by the question. "Morrison, why?" The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Elena Morrison, of course. How had he not recognized her immediately? 20 years ago, when Marcus was just 12 and still living with his human adoptive family, there had been an incident at his school. A group of older boys had cornered a younger girl during recess, taunting her about her hand-me-down clothes and her shy demeanor. Marcus had intervened even though he was outnumbered and outweighed. The girl's name had been Elena Morrison. She had been 6 years old, with the same warm brown eyes and auburn hair, though much longer then. After he had chased away her tormentors, she had looked up at him with those eyes full of gratitude and said, "Thank you. Someday I'll help you too." He had laughed at the time, touched by her sincerity but thinking it was just the words of a grateful child. They had been friends for the rest of that school year before his adoptive family moved to another town. He had never seen her again. Until now. "You probably don't remember," Marcus said softly, "but we knew each other once, a long time ago." Elena paused in her preparation of the bottles, studying his face more intently. "You do look familiar," she said slowly. "But I can't quite—" "Riverside Elementary," Marcus prompted. "You were 6. Some boys were bothering you during recess." Elena's eyes widened in recognition. "Marcus," she breathed. "Marcus Hoffman." She had known him by his adoptive family's name, of course. "You saved me from Tommy Richardson and his friends. You said you would help me someday," Marcus reminded her with a weak smile. Elena looked down at the babies, then back at him. "I guess someday is today." She finished preparing the bottles and carefully lifted Gabriel, the most restless of the 3. The baby latched onto the makeshift nipple immediately, his tiny hands gripping her fingers as he drank. "I work night shifts at the hospital," Elena explained as she fed him. "That's why I was in the park so late. I always cut through there on my way home because it's quieter than the main streets." "Lucky for us," Marcus said, though he wondered if luck had anything to do with it. The universe seemed to have a sense of irony, bringing Elena back into his life at the exact moment when he needed her most. As the night wore on, Elena tended to all 3 babies with the skill of someone who had spent years caring for infants. She changed makeshift diapers fashioned from old towels, kept them warm and fed, and even managed to get them settled into a peaceful sleep arranged in a nest of blankets on the floor beside the bed. Meanwhile, she also worked to treat Marcus's injuries as best she could with the supplies she had on hand. The silver had done its damage, but the blade had missed his heart by inches. With proper care and his natural healing abilities, he might actually survive this. "The silver is slowing your healing," Elena observed as she cleaned the wound. "But it's not poisoning your system the way it would have 20 years ago. Your body has adapted." Marcus was surprised by her knowledge. "How do you know about silver poisoning and werewolves?" Elena paused in her work. "I've been working in pediatric medicine for 5 years now. You'd be surprised how many supernatural children come through our doors. I've learned to recognize the signs and symptoms of various conditions that don't appear in standard medical textbooks." It made sense. Hospitals, especially children's hospitals, would be natural places for supernatural families to seek help when their own healing methods weren't enough. Elena would have seen it all by now. "The babies," Marcus said suddenly, a thought occurring to him. "They're too young for their wolf nature to manifest, but they're still half werewolf. Will they be okay without pack support?" Elena settled back in her chair, considering the question. "I think they'll be fine for now. Werewolf infants are remarkably resilient, and they have you. As long as you're alive and present, they'll have the alpha connection they need to stay stable." "And if I don't make it?" Marcus asked quietly. Elena met his eyes directly. "You're going to make it," she said firmly. "You're stronger than you know, and you have too much to live for to give up now." As dawn broke over the city, painting Elena's small apartment in shades of gold and rose, Marcus found himself believing her. The pain in his chest had dulled to a manageable ache, and his breathing had steadied. The babies were sleeping peacefully, their small faces relaxed and content. For the first time since the attack, Marcus felt something that might have been hope. "What happens now?" he asked as Elena prepared to leave for her day shift at the hospital. "Now you rest and heal," she said, gathering her things. "I'll be back tonight with proper supplies and baby formula. We'll figure out the rest as we go." She paused at the door, looking back at the small family she had rescued. "They won't find you here," she said softly. "This place isn't in my real name, and I pay the rent in cash. As far as the world knows, Elena Morrison lives in a completely different part of town." Marcus felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. Elena wasn't just a kind-hearted Omega who had stumbled across them by accident. She was someone who understood what it meant to hide, to protect, to survive on the edges of society. "Why?" he asked. "Why risk everything for strangers?" Elena smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the 6-year-old girl who had promised to help him someday. Because 20 years ago, a boy who barely knew me decided I was worth protecting. He didn't think about the cost or the danger. He just did what was right. She opened the door, letting in a cold breeze that carried the scent of snow and possibility. Now it's my turn. As the door closed behind her, Marcus looked down at his sleeping sons and felt tears he didn't know he had been holding back. They were safe. For the first time since their birth, his children were truly safe. Outside, the city was waking up to a new day. Somewhere out there, Jonathan and his conspirators were probably wondering what had happened to the bodies they had left to freeze in the park. They would search, of course, but they would be looking for an Alpha King, not a wounded man hiding in a nurse's studio apartment. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself rest for the first time in months. When he opened them again, he would begin planning. He would heal and grow strong. He would learn who could be trusted and who had been part of Jonathan's betrayal. And someday, when the time was right, he would reclaim what was his, but for now, in this small, warm sanctuary that smelled of kindness and hope, Marcus Blackwood was content to simply be alive, to listen to his children breathe, to remember that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes from a promise made by a 6-year-old girl who never forgot the boy who stood up for her when no one else would. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering their tracks and giving them the gift of time. Time to heal, time to plan, time to discover that some bonds once forged can never truly be broken. Marcus smiled and let sleep take him, knowing that when he woke, Elena would be there. His children would be safe. And their future, whatever it might hold, would be brighter than the darkness they had left behind in that cold park. The Alpha King was dead, perhaps. But Marcus Blackwood, father and protector, was very much alive, and that was more than enough for now.